the fake.
This is the way. The truth is, I am Iron Man.
Tells me enough for Memphis.
Hello, critics, non-critics, and friends. Welcome to the Film Optics Podcast, where we take a glance into blockbusters, indie films, and everything in between. I'm your host, Christian, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in film, Devin, and today we're here to give our spoiler-free reactions to A Quiet Place, ... Day 1. But before we begin today's episode, you can listen to our podcast on podcast platforms around the internet. That includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. And if you are a new or seasoned listener to our show, we would love to hear from you guys. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Film Optics. That is Optics with an X. Or you can email us at filmoptics@gmail.com for any movie-related questions. Devin, happy House of the Dragon Sunday. What's going on? How's your weekend been?
It's been pretty solid. It's not a holiday for me, really. I don't partake in these Sundays. I know you do. You didn't partake the first one though. I remember that.
For which one?
House of the Dragon, episode 1. I think you remember you being late on that one.
Yeah, that is very true. I had a birthday celebration to go to, but I remain faithful. I did not look up spoilers. I did not look up reviews prior. So, from episode 2 onwards, it's House of the Dragon Sunday for me, for sure. It was just terrible timing. And, I didn't want to be the person to be like, hey, sorry, I have to go watch House of the Dragon instead of coming to your birthday party.
Yeah, that would have been quite the excuse.
I think it would have been a good enough excuse, like, hey, say no more, like, we know you have a podcast and yada, yada, yada. It's like, yeah, but, I decided to be a good person altogether. But have you been laying low this weekend to gear up for next weekend, 4th of July weekend?
Yeah, I guess next weekend's a big deal, a little bit. And then we got a birthday coming up after that.
That's right. Yeah, you do. Yes, you like soon after. For any listeners out there who don't know, Devin and my mom actually share a birthday.
It's a very special birthday, that's for sure.
How old will you be again? 30? 29? I always lose count. It's crazy.
29. What a terrible number.
29? 29?
One of the worst birthdays.
Why is it the worst birthday?
It's just a nothing number.
I mean, I don't know. It's your last year of your 20s, so I mean, honestly, turning 30 is a little overrated. I feel like a lot of people have put so much pressure on turning the big 3-0, but, you're turning 29. It'll be fun. Yeah, but I know what you mean. It's not like a milestone birthday. Like, yeah. I will say, after you turn 30, it's like, It's like, yeah, it's my birthday. But, yeah, I don't know. I think 60 is another big one for people. I feel like that is like 60 is another 30 years on this earth. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful birthday coming up. Only a few days shy of 4th of July. I think your birthday is on Sunday, isn't it? I think it is. Yeah. You do anything fun for your birthday? Or you're kind of just hanging out? Like you do anything with the family, the friends?
I was gonna be with family. Figure something out.
I feel it. Maybe I got to Roar on the Shore if that hasn't happened already.
That's a throwback.
Gods, that was wow. That was a wild time. That was a crazy weekend. I'll never remember ever for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It was a good one. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful birthday all together this coming up weekend. It's coming up fast, man. It's coming up fast. This is the last day of June. As of recording this, June 30th, 2024. We're halfway through the year. Devin. We're halfway to Christmas already. Can you believe it? It's crazy.
It's crazy.
It is pretty insane. So really quick before we dive into our review today, as you know, Devin, there is a Steam sale going on right now. And we also have the Prime Day sale coming up, I think like halfway through July. I think it's the 12th and the 13th. But I've been getting a lot of peer pressure from a lot of my other PC gaming friends that have brought to my attention that Elden Ring is on sale for $40. And they're like, you should totally try it out. And I was like, but why would I want to?
Yeah, never really gonna try any of those games. It's just not a, don't have the patience, I guess.
It's more of, yeah, like if I could either get it for like super cheap or I've played Bloodborne a little bit. That's like the PS4 from software game that never came to any other platform. But I was like, you know what? I'm like, maybe like if the time is right, like if all the stars align, where it's like, hey, I have nothing else on my agenda, you know, like all my work is done. I'm like, if it's like in the dead of winter and I have absolutely nothing else to do, and if the game is on sale for like, let's say $30 or less, maybe I'd try it out. But I don't know if I can just dive into something like that. It's kind of weird, but yeah, that's pretty much been happening all this past weekend. I haven't really done too much this past week besides work. I went to go see A Quiet Place, day one, which is what we're talking about here today, and Kinds of Kindness as well. So I kind of had not a double feature weekend, but I saw 2 new movies this week. And I also watched a oldie but a goodie last night. I watched Kick-Ass, the first one.
Classic.
Such a classic. And I'm going to follow it up, of course, with Kick-Ass 2. So, yeah. And I've also been watching The Bear. How far are you in that, by the way, before we dive into our our review here of Quiet Place Day 1? Have you finished it already?
I'm about halfway through.
I am also halfway through. I finished the first 5 episodes. I actually got up like super early this morning because I was at the pool all day yesterday, and going to the pool takes a lot out of you. And I woke up around like 7 this morning, and I just started watching The Bear season 3. So it looks like we're pretty much in the same.
What a beautiful, beautiful morning.
I know it's The Bear Sunday morning and House of the. It's a wonderful Sunday. It's a wonderful, wonderful Sunday.
The Bears usually don't show up on Sundays for football, so it's good that you get the good Bear.
The Bears. It took me a second to get that reference. I was like, oh yeah, Chicago. Yeah, that's man. Well, you know what they say, one man's QB is another team's treasure. So Steelers will keep Justin Fields in good hands. Hopefully, I hope he doesn't leave because I would love to see him shine. But got a few more months until football season starts, so we will see what unfolds. But as we have mentioned before, we're going to be giving our spoiler-free review of A Quiet Place Day 1. Again, spoiler-free. We're not going to be giving away any details whatsoever. This is a prequel to the first 2 Quiet Place films. So honestly, and I think what really makes this great, this entire franchise as of right now that it's technically a franchise, it's nice how people can kind of just jump in and out. Like, you don't need to watch A Quiet Place 1 or 2 to jump into A Quiet Place Day 1. I got a lot of people to see it this weekend, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, so we will be right back after this introduction to A Quiet Place Day 1.
I actually had the idea for Day 1 when I was writing Quiet Place Part 2, because when I wrote the opening for the Abbott family going through the circumstances of the first alien invasion, I thought that would be an amazing story point to drop into the real world in New York City and see how the whole rest of the world was dealing with it, and certainly under probably more extreme circumstances, being arguably the loudest city in the world, and how people would respond to that in great numbers.
And we are back with our spoiler-free review of A Quiet Place Day 1. This film is directed by Michael Cernowski, and writers include Michael Cernowski, John Krasinski, the man himself who started A Quiet Place universe altogether, and Brian Woods, and stars Joseph Quinn, Lupita Nyong'o, Alex Wolff, and many, many more. Actually, not too many, because there's not a lot of actors in this film, because, yeah, a lot of people are starting to die off from these creatures. And the synopsis is as follows. A woman named San finds herself trapped in New York City during the early stages of an invasion by alien creatures with ultra sensitive hearing. Devin, really quick, do you know what these creatures are called? Because they do have a name, and I did not know that they had a name.
Sure.
I can smell your sarcasm all the way from Music City. So the name of the creatures that we have been introduced to, they are called Death Angels.
Death Angels. What a name.
It's very odd. Like, it's not that it's a bad name. I just didn't know that these creatures had a name. And it's weird because when I was seeing this for like my screening, it really was just like a fan screening event, and then critics got invited to it as well. But there was like a Quiet Place trivia that they played beforehand. It was on the screen, not like the people in charge who were doing it, but it was one of like the previews, because for whatever reason we still had previews and a screening. But one of the questions was, what are the names of the creatures that have invaded Earth and A Quiet Place? And I forgot what the other names were, but one of them was Death Angel. And I was like, I didn't even know they had a name. And then they revealed that they are called Death Angels. And I was like, everyone was just looking around. They're like, I didn't even know that they had a name, because everyone there was just so familiar with this film. But I'm going to pass it over to Devin here. That was just a little bit of trivia before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of this review. But Devin, what are your initial thoughts of this film?
Yeah, going into this one, I know I do recall Quiet Place Part 2. I wasn't the hugest fan of when we covered that. However long ago that was. Was that like 2020?
So it came out in, hold on, let me double check here. A Quiet Place 2 came out, 2020. Yeah, and the first one came out in 2018.
Yeah, I remember it being one of the last ones we saw in theaters before all the craziness happened.
See, I remember a little bit, because I remember we were supposed to see A Quiet Place Part 2, but we didn't because of the pandemic. That's what I remember. Because did it come out, or was it supposed to come out in 2019? I can't remember.
I really don't recall.
I swear, because we were so excited to see A Quiet Place Part 2, and then it got pushed back. But there's no way it got pushed back to 2020. That's right. It came out in 2021. So that's right. Okay, I remember now.
Maybe it was one of the first after the pandemic.
Yeah, one of the first after, because I believe the last movie that we recorded for the podcast that we saw in theaters, or at least the last one I saw in theaters before the pandemic, was Onward. It was the Disney movie with Chris Pratt and Tom Holland. And the next movie we were supposed to see was A Quiet Place Part 2, but then John Krasinski pulled it. They delayed it, and it came out in 2021. That's what it was. I'm sorry. Continue. I just had to get that out there.
So yeah, I wasn't the hugest fan of that one. I just felt like it was more of the same as far as a sequel, just minus John Krasinski, obviously, as his character did not make it out of the first one.
All right.
So going to this, I had tempered excitement. Like, I was definitely excited to see what a day one would look like as far as the origin of what happened when these death angels appeared. Apparently, I guess it makes sense. They're coming from above, like angels, but they're causing death. So I guess I see the name there. But yeah, I was definitely interested to see the origin story as far as A Quiet Place world goes, and I think overall I was thoroughly surprised by what we got here, which was kind of more of a heartwarming like story on humanity overall, instead of just like a straight up horror origin story. Like, of course there's still some horror elements. There's a couple jump scares here and there. There's obviously the creatures running around killing people, and you get a fair amount of that. But at the core of the story, it's definitely more of a just like take on humanity, and it's kind of like interesting to see, because it's just not what I was expecting at all. But I think it really worked for me as far as just a story between two people and what what life is like when there's no one else around and just kind of living and figuring things out. I think it's great to see Lupita Nyong'o on screen, just killing it as a lead in this movie. And also Joseph Quinn. I haven't seen him in anything except for Stranger Things, so it was really good to see him killing it in something else other than that. Excited for him in Fantastic Four coming up. But yeah, the chemistry between those two just really carries the movie, especially throughout the middle portion when they're kind of are on their own and going through a bit of a fun little soiree, I guess you could call it. Just a fun adventure they're on. It just kind of warms the soul a bit when you see, especially the bar scene between those two. I know we're not going to spoil anything, but the bar scene just kind of cements them as just a great friendship. And I like that it was platonic throughout. There was no sense of anything romantic or anything like that. It didn't have to have that kind of undertone to it. It was just kind of two people at the core of things that are just enjoying each other's presences, and there's no ulterior motive between the two. They're just living life as best as they can in a world like this. And I think that was really well done.
One thing above all else, because I actually got to see this film in IMAX, and you should definitely see this in IMAX if you have an IMAX theater near you. But the one thing about this franchise that is always consistent is the sound design. It just hits every single time, and I almost forgot how good it was because the last time I watched the first two A Quiet Place movies was maybe about a year or two ago. And yeah, it sounds good at home, but like watching it in a theater, I think is where these films and A Quiet Place Day One specifically is where it shines, because everyone is dead silent when it comes to watching these films. My entire audience was literally on the edge of their seats. And with everything that happens, it's like, you're figuring out what's happening on day one. Like, what happened when these monsters attacked, when these death angels came down raining from above. And there's no real backstory on the death angels. It's just one day they just came to Earth, and everyone is freaking out. They're trying to acclimate how to almost coexist with these monsters at this point, as we've seen within A Quiet Place 1 and Part 2. But seeing it happening from the beginning, it's just utter chaos. And the fact that it's in New York City makes it 10 times worse for these creatures, because it's one of the loudest cities, like at least in the States, or overall, like in the world. And the movie actually starts off by saying how noisy New York City is, where it's literally the equivalent of a constant scream, I believe it was, because of the hustle and bustle of everyday life and the nightlife of New York City. So it's like the way that you were able to focus more so on Lupita Nyong'o's character and her journey trying to go back to Harlem for reasons I cannot really explain, but it's just part of her character, of her wanting to grab a slice of pizza. It really made me want to get a slice of pizza after this movie.
Get yourself a New York slice.
Yeah, she was looking for that New York slice for sure.
I've never had one, to be honest.
Nor have I. I mean, I've had, like thin pizza, but not like New York style pizza. I've had Chicago style pizza, not from Chicago though. But it was like, it's like the Nashville Chicago pizza. So it's Chicago style, but I can't really call it Chicago pizza because I've not been to Chicago to have a slice of real Chicago style pizza. But yes, pizza is mentioned a lot in this film. And I also like to raise a glass to the Sam and Frodo reference in this film, where Sam is played by Lupita Nyong'o and Frodo is Sam's cat, and it's an awesome cat.
I gotta be honest, I was not a fan of this cat at the beginning. I was just like, what? I was just so confused with why everyone was like, not to spoil anything, but there's a lot of shenanigans that the cat gets into that the humans have to kind of save him from. I was just like, oh my god, it's a cat, come on, why are we risking human lives for this?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Devin and I are more dog people than cat people.
I feel like it would have been same if it was a dog. Like, obviously, like more of a dog person, but the different shenanigans that this cat was going through, just like, wow, we're really putting a lot into this. Yeah.
I will say that you're right. If it was a dog, I feel like the dog would have been gone in like 0.25 seconds.
Yeah, the dog would not have lasted.
No, not at all.
And I'm surprised the cat lasted. I mean, cats aren't, they're usually quiet, but they definitely make some noise.
Yeah, I was just about to say, this is like the world's quietest cat, like ever. Like ever. It's the weirdest thing. But it was fun. Like I didn't mind the cat as much, but I was wondering why they kept focusing on the cat if nothing was necessarily going to happen to the cats altogether. Cause I know that's like a question on everyone's mind. It's like, oh, what happens to the cat? What happens to the cat?
It's definitely better than the Argyle cat. I'll give him that.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, the Argyle cat. Well, see, he was more protected for the most part. But see, that cat made noise when things were happening. This cat, quiet as a church mouse. It was the strangest thing. That's the only thing I didn't get.
Yeah, never meowed.
Not once. Never hissed. I think it purred a few times. But yeah, it never lashed out altogether. I was like, this is a very well trained cat. But he is definitely one of the stars of the show. Not necessarily in a lot of the marketing, but you do notice him in bits and pieces altogether. But yeah, like when it comes to the film, it's, I love the connection that Joseph Quinn's character and Lupita's character had together. It is kind of like, I found it was a little bit odd that like we get a little bit of Joseph's character's backstory, but it's not like a lot. Like he's just kind of someone that Lupita's character runs into.
He just arrives, basically. Kind of like the monsters themselves.
Right, yeah. So his name is Eric in the film. Digimon Hansu, he makes a return. He was in A Quiet Place Part 2. And I believe in A Quiet Place Part 2, he mentions that he was in New York City when they first arrived, and how there were 12 boats originally supposed to depart from New York City, because you do find out in the second film in part 2 that the Death Angels cannot swim. And that kind of pops up here and there within this film. But I remember him making that small little comment, and I'm surprised that they actually added that into this movie. It fits so well within this universe. Less on the family aspects, because within the first 2 films it's about parents protecting their children, and this movie they're just trying to survive, like, period. There is no children about, and people kind of just get knocked down left and right altogether. But I'm going to pass it back over to you, Devin, because I feel like I've been hogging the mic here for a bit. Is there anything you wanted to bring up that we have not had a chance to speak on when it comes to this film? I know we've talked about the cat, we've talked about the relationship a little bit between Eric and Sam, but how did you feel about the jump scares and the way that they handle the monsters altogether?
Yeah, I'd say the jump scares, they never really got me overall. Obviously, I'm more of a horror veteran, so nothing too crazy as far as, like, I feel like if you're going to this expecting like a straight up horror movie, it's just not really what you're gonna get. It's definitely more of a like apocalypse, end of days. Like, I wouldn't even say action. It's just kind of like a drama, I guess, at the base of it. Drama is kind of the core genre, I would say.
Or thriller almost. Yeah. Like a thriller. Yeah. Because, yeah, you're right. It's not, there's jump scares, but like jump scares are more so startling than anything. But yeah, I can't say it's like horror because, yeah, like you said, it's like end of days almost. I
did want to give a shout out to the director here, Michael Sarnowski. he hasn't done much, but he did direct Pig back in 2021, which was with Nicolas Cage, and it was kind of renowned as one of the better movies of that year. And I think it was cool that The Quiet Place, Day One, they definitely had a lot of options as far as director goes, because obviously John Krasinski was for the first two, so I'm sure they had people lining out the door to direct this one. But it was cool that they went with the more indie direction and chose Michael instead of some other options, even though he didn't have as much experience, and I think he did a great job.
I definitely agree. And I think that was a lot of people's biggest reservations for this film, is that, it's, John Krasinski isn't there. Like, it's not, he's in the writer's seat for sure, but so he is there. He is attached to the project, just not in the director's project. But I think there might have been a little bit of a nod to I think there was like a little bit of a nod to John Krasinski in this film. There is a certain character that calls out the word Jonathan, and I was like, is that like a call back to is that a callback to just the original Quiet Place films altogether?
I was honestly surprised at how quick they just figure things out, like especially in New York City. They mention how loud it is. It just feels like, wow, I can't believe they're actually figuring out how these things work. Maybe humanity's not as dumb as we think it is.
That's true. Because it's like, I was interested to see how they handled everything when it came to, figuring out what triggers the Death Angels, these creatures, because I feel like time is very compressed, especially within an hour and like 42-minute or an hour and like 40-minute movie altogether. But it was, I like how they're like, okay, so we just need to, just be quiet. But it's like anytime anyone made like the slightest noise, because anytime anyone made the slightest noise in this film, people freaked out. But as you find out later on, with the original Quiet Place movie, which takes place after this, there are certain pockets of time where they're able to use their full volume by masking their sound with a louder sound, as we saw within the first Quiet Place with the waterfall and Emily Blunt's character giving birth when the fireworks were going off. Great movie. But those are just a few instances altogether. But yeah, it's interesting how they are able to kind of acclimate so quickly all together with that. But it's fantastic how they were able to put this together. And, I feel like this franchise can go the distance, even if John Krasinski isn't directing. Not saying that I wouldn't want him to direct. I was kind of hoping that he was going to show up here, but then I remembered he wasn't in New York when this all took place. He was at like a baseball game, as we saw in A Quiet Place Part 2. But it would have been, I don't know. That's why I think that Jonathan line was like a nod to his character altogether. But I will say, for, I guess, negatives, since I'm kind of already rolling here, not much of a negative, just something I've noticed. I feel like the pacing was a bit drawn out in some places, but overall I feel like it was a great experience, especially that ending scene. It was probably the most tenseful thing I've seen in quite some time, for sure. But let's get into our final thoughts in our ratings here. Devin, what are your final thoughts and ratings for A Quiet Place Day One?
Final thoughts, definitely a pleasant surprise here as far as this movie. It went in a direction that I think not many people would have expected, but I think it was important to try something different from the first two to kind of stand out and deliver something that's a little more, just a little different than the first two, because I think the first two definitely felt too similar to each other, and I think that's why I wasn't a huge fan of the second one. So for this one to go a different direction, it definitely felt very refreshing, especially with the core humanity story at the center of it between the two characters. So I definitely appreciated that. As far as the score goes, I'd probably give it like an 86 overall. There's really not too much to complain about. It's really short and sweet, and it has a nice story at the center of it.
I definitely agree. I think another quick thing for me, like when it comes to my rating for this, I would definitely give it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. So I would give this like a solid. Yeah, I would say like an 85 out of 100, just like one peg down from Devin. As much as I will say, as much as I like to see how things unfolded, like we had mentioned before, like they did figure out things pretty quickly of how to survive. I wish we would have gotten a little bit more time during the happening when these death angels finally came. Like we got a good chunk, but I feel like we could have gotten, if there was like maybe 10 minutes more in the movie, just like dedicated to them, you know, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is not even during the happening or like just like a little bit beforehand. Like I wish we would have gotten a little bit more established with some of these characters, or just spent a little bit more time with the characters prior to the happening. I think that's what I'm trying to make my words say altogether. But yes, it was a great movie. You know, I would love to see John Krasinski back at some point, maybe for A Quiet Place Part 3, because A Quiet Place Part 2 definitely ends on a major cliffhanger. So we would definitely need to get the next part of that story. But overall, it's a fantastic film. Like I mentioned before, everyone needs to see this in IMAX. The sound design is extraordinary. As I mentioned before, it is one of those deeply human stories at its core. Less about family, more just about the triumph of like the human spirit altogether, because Lupita Nyong'o's character is already in like a hospice situation during the beginning, so her fate has already been sealed, but the fact that she's able to act in a way where, you know, she just keeps moving forward. Everyone in this film, it's a strong sense of visual storytelling, especially for this movie, because there isn't a lot of dialogue, which I think is, you know, on brand for A Quiet Place altogether. But yeah, it was a great movie. I think it's a good prequel, and it's kind of making me want to watch the first two again. So I might have to do that here at some point. But an 86 out of 100 from Devin, and of course an 85 out of 100 from me. So our podcast score is going to be an 85.5 out of 100 for A Quiet Place Day 1. And with all that said, that does conclude today's episode. If you enjoy what you heard, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred podcast platform of choice, and make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Film Optics. Again, that is Optics with an X. And don't forget to share an episode of our podcast with a fellow movie lover, whether it be your mother, your brother, or your significant other. Spread the love for the Film Optics podcast. And now let's take a sneak peek at some upcoming releases that you can look forward to on our end. So I believe we are going to be covering The Bear Season 3. Devin and I, as of right now, are about halfway through that season. It's an easy watch. Each episode's only like 25 to 35-ish minutes. We're going to be continuing the, I guess, horror movie train kind of thing with Maxine coming out next week. So we're definitely going to be covering that, as well as films such as Deadpool and Wolverine. And I may or may not be covering season 2 of House of the Dragon once that finishes. I'm not entirely sure, but I do have a few Blu-ray reviews that I'm going to be compiling within the month of July. So definitely keep a lookout for that. And outside of what is coming up next, you can actually check out our The Boys Season 4 No Spoilers review. It includes all 8 episodes, but there are no spoilers whatsoever, so you can definitely check that out, as well as our Inside Out 2 review and our Bad Boys Ride or Die spoiler-free review. And also, Devin, speaking of Inside Out 2, I shared a little bit of news with you in the chat that Inside Out 2 crosses $1 billion at the worldwide box office. This is the fastest animated film to ever reach this milestone, which is crazy to think about. But hats off to A Quiet Place.
Also, A Quiet Place Day One, the largest opening of the trilogy.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I said hats off to A Quiet Place, and I was like, no, hats off to Inside Out too. But yes, also hats off to A Quiet Place Day One, biggest opening of the franchise yet, which is crazy to think about. The budget was around $67 million, and it debuted at the worldwide box office, hitting at $98.5 million, which is
The theaters are still hanging around for us. They're getting the job done the past couple months, despite some slow times.
There's definitely slow times. I think it just depends on the movie. It really does. You know, we saw the unfortunate news of bike riders getting pushed to digital so quickly after 3 weeks in theaters.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy altogether. It just, I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't say theaters are dying, but it's like there are just some things that people are willing to go see in theaters, and other things they're just, sleeping on or flying by. But with all that said, thank you all for listening. If you enjoy the show, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and stay connected with us by following us on Twitter for the latest updates. That was Devin, and I'm Christian signing off. And remember, life is like a movie, so go out there